Joining me is the panel, Labor Senator Kimberley Kitching and Liberal Senator James Paterson. James, are you comfortable with so much water in the Murray going down the river in a drought to keep a naturally salty lake fresh?
Andrew, this week I met with some of the farmers who came here to protest in Canberra, and in a couple of weeks I'm going to northern Victoria to visit irrigators to hear from them directly. I think the government is wise to listen carefully to them and to act where we can to address their concerns, because although the drought is the significant exacerbating factor here, when you talk to these farmers and the communities that rely on them, they tell us very clearly that they believe policy is exacerbating those problems.
No, I think so. Kimberley, what do you think? Sending Murray down the Murray, water farmers could use just to keep a naturally salty lake fresh, does that make sense?
Well, remember, this is the 7th year of this government, Andrew, and they've had all that time to create a sensible water policy. It hasn't happened. As James says, the drought is obviously exacerbating this, but there is such a thing as forward planning, and that hasn't happened. So the farmers were very angry. They came into question time in Senate yesterday and heckled particularly the National Party, and obviously some of the way that the National Party has dealt with some of these issues has made what one might think with their natural constituency very, very angry, and that was obvious yesterday. But I do think it's time.
Put a red-hot poker on the national backside. Do you worry about that? Those ministers were hopping today. But to my point, do you think it's a wise use of water we could use to keep farmers in business and farming communities alive, a wise use to send it down the Murray to keep a naturally salty lake, Lake Alexandrina, fresh?
Well, I'm not a water economist or a water policy specialist, Andrew, but it does on the surface that does not make sense, particularly when you have farmers who are, I mean, they are in the middle of what is really tragic circumstances, and we need those people, we need those communities. So, and they need water. That's the basic point. They need water. I'm very glad to see there's going to be a ministerial council meeting on the 17th of December. That cannot come quickly enough. Those issues will have to be thrashed out there.
Look, I absolutely agree. Former Prime Minister Tony Abbott yesterday visited his longtime friend Cardinal George Pell in prison. Now, Abbott, like me, is convinced Pell is innocent, and I've shown why I think the crime he's accused of was impossible. And Pell is appealing that his conviction for abusing 2 boys. But Victorian Premier Dan Andrews today blasted Tony Abbott. Have a listen.
Shameful, frankly. Absolutely shameful. I'm just visiting a friend. Well, if you want to go visiting convicted child sex offenders, then surely you would think for a moment that this is something that's bigger than you and him and your friendship. Surely you would pause and reflect on the fact that there are literally thousands of victims of clergy child sexual abuse. Lives have ended, lives have been destroyed. It's appalling.
James, is it shameful for Tony Abbott to visit a friend of long standing that he thinks is innocent because victims of other priests might be upset?
Andrew, Tony's big enough and ugly enough to explain his own reasons for doing that, but let's be very clear about what Daniel Andrews is trying to do here. He's trying to distract Victorians from the fact that we learnt this week that he had dumplings with the developer who is at the heart of the ICAC scandal being investigated in Victoria right now. Daniel Andrews has a 20-year relationship with John Woodman, the developer at the heart of this scandal. He's taken personal donations from him, and he is clearly throwing this bone out there to distract people from those disturbing revelations.
James, I'm always glad to hear a free kick on that particular issue. I was wondering how I'd get around to covering that on a national show, and I'm glad you just did it. Now to the question, is it shameful for Tony Abbott to visit a friend of long standing that is convinced is innocent, whose appeal is to be heard by the High Court? Is it shameful to visit that friend simply because victims of other priests might be upset?
Andrew, I'm sure, like me, that Tony Abbott absolutely abhors child sexual abuse, and I'm sure if he genuinely believed that Cardinal Pell was guilty of that he would not visit him. We don't know how the courts will decide Cardinal Pell's matter. I certainly, as a current elected official, won't be commenting one way or the other on his guilt and innocence until the High Court has rendered its verdict.
Kimberly, shameful?
Well, I don't think anyone should be commenting on matters that are before the court, particularly such a sensitive matter. And I think that the High Court next year will make a final decision. And I think until that time, no one should be commenting on Cardinal Pell.
Maybe not on Cardinal Pell, but the point is whether a man is entitled to visit someone in jail that is convinced is innocent without a politician trying to make him seem like he's soft on pedophiles and calling it shameful. I think that is shameful.
I don't think anyone should be commenting on this matter. The High Court will be hearing this matter in the final. This is really a final appeal stage for Cardinal Pell, and the High Court will be making that decision next year. And I think until then, no one should comment on it.
Well, in that case, that's advice for Daniel Andrews, the Premier of Victoria. He should have shut the hell up himself rather than drag Tony Abbott into this. And I'd like to know who in that jail tipped off the media to film Tony Abbott as he walked out. That too was absolutely shameful, and I'd like to see an inquiry into that. Who in the prison wanted to embarrass Tony Abbott, wanted to embarrass George Pell and try to make a media circus out of a private visit? That's disgraceful. Now, over the past 7 years, James, we've had 6 royal commissions already into child sex abuse, trade union corruption, children in detention in the Northern Territory, the banks, aged care, and now there's one on the abuse of the disabled. Now Labor wants a 7th royal commission in 7 years into the suicide of veterans. Your Prime Minister says is open to it. Is it healthy, actually, to have so many royal commissions, each of them costing millions of dollars?
I think what we need to be most concerned about here and focused on here, Andrew, is the outcomes for the people affected. That's what I know the Prime Minister cares about, and it's what I care about. I'm much more clear-eyed about the importance of those outcomes for veterans and their families than I am about the process of how we get there. I think the Prime Minister is right to be open-minded about this and to continue to talk to Veterans Group and the friends and families of veterans that we have lost. But we have to just be very clear that our priority here is how we get to the right outcomes. And if a Royal Commission is the best process to deliver that, then fine. But if there are other more expedited ways of dealing with it, then I think we should do that instead.
Well, if you're going to spend millions of dollars, I'd rather go to the veterans straight away and not to the lawyers for a picnic for another year or two. Look, I was going to ask you, Kimberly, about this, but because we're running out of time, you both had briefings today with a delegation of human rights activists and politicians from Hong Kong. What did you learn from that?
Well, they were able to give us a very current snapshot of what is happening in Hong Kong. I think that they were able to explain to us the importance of the local and overwhelmingly pro-democratic elections that were held recently in Hong Kong. I think this bodes very well for that territory, and I think also for the Taiwanese elections, which are going to be held in January next year. I think also the heartbreak that is happening there. I mean, this is a people who are worried that they are going to lose something we take as for granted as being able to breathe in the air, and that is freedom. And they're worried that they're going to lose that. And I think, you know, when you meet these, I mean, it is such a privilege to be able to meet with these people, to hear their stories. I mean, these are first-hand accounts from the streets of Hong Kong, and I think it's really important that they were encouraging a delegation of Australian parliamentarians to come, and I think that would be something that would be really worth undertaking to show
This is one of the big flashpoints of our generation, and I'm glad you both have been so active in this area. Kimberly Kitching and James Paterson, thank you very much for your time.